And I'm going to turn it over to you, Amy. Thank you so much for being here today.
You bet. Thank you so much. And I just have appreciated this conference so much. So many good topics and great information. When I saw the participant sign up list this morning, I went, oh, shoot, I probably would do well to have a colleague with me. So I'm going to introduce my colleague. He's going to kind of be playing backup because as we were sharing our PowerPoints, and I kind of tweaked this one a little bit just for this conference, I was not able to share the notes version with him. And so we're kind of frantically this morning going back and forth. So I am Amy Bartels. I'm MU Extension, and I'm located in the middle of the state in Camden County. I'm Human Development and Family Science. So we offer community education and resources from kind of birth all the way to the end. So we see all kinds of different audiences, and this program speaks really no matter where you are in that stage. So John Fuller is my colleague, and he's located, well, actually, John, if you'll just introduce yourself, that would be great.
I got my mute button. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I'm John Fuller. I am in the southeast Missouri part of Missouri. For those that may not really be familiar with Missouri, I'm that real close to that little part that sticks down in Arkansas. So that kind of gives you a general idea of where I'm at.
Thank you so much. So John and I are what we call the state leads for this program. We've spent a considerable amount of time developing and kind of modifying and reworking, et cetera, this program called Taking Care of You. It's actually owned by the curators. It's a program that was developed from some research quite a few years ago here at the university. And so we're really proud of this program and where it's gone. In fact, over this time of quarantine and COVID and global pandemics, it's really taken off. And so that was why kind of actually late yesterday afternoon, I called John and said, hey, I need you kind of as backup. So even though he doesn't have notes, he knows this program like the back of his hand. So I'm gonna ask him to wing it a little bit, but we'll tag team here and walk through it. So I do want you to know as a listener that Taking Care of You, Body, Mind, and Spirit is part of a larger series. It's actually, I'll call it an 8-hour series because we've done some, with us all being on Zoom, we've reworked a little bit. So the program can be done in 4 2-hour sessions or 8 1-hour sessions. We've had some organizations that have said, gosh, we'd really like this sort of as an in-service day. And we're kind of thinking about how that might look. But when you get this program in person, you get all kinds of activities and really a deep dive into some of these concepts that help you learn how to take care of you. So we're going to give you sort of the overview today because I noticed that our session time says 45 minutes. So really wanted to make sure that we keep within that time today. There are a lot of programs and promises out there that focus on stress. And honestly, we can't always control these situations, but what we can control is how we manage that stress. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And I'm going to move. John, let me know, you're not able to see are you able to see the little black square? I want to get rid of that. Okay, perfect. So all my participants out there in virtual land, I want you to picture this glass of water. Maybe you have one sitting next to you. I do. All right, so how heavy do you think this glass of water is? Or maybe it's your cup of coffee this morning. If you were to hold that up, the actual weight of your cup doesn't matter. You might have an 8 ounce, you might have a 16 ounce, you might have, one of the big guys because you're determined to drink more water. The actual weight doesn't matter, but it's how long you hold on to it. So if you held on to that for a minute, you'd probably be okay. And I think you can probably see me with my cup. I'm gonna hold it here just while we're talking, okay? Think about if you held that up for an hour. What might happen there? How about if you held it up for the entire day? You might have some injury, maybe to your tendons, to your muscles. Certainly your joints would ache a little bit. What if you held it up for a week? Okay, let's think broadly. What if you've been holding that cup for years? You can probably see where I'm going with this. It's the exact same weight. It's not changed, right? But the longer that you hold it, the heavier it becomes. The same thing goes for our stuff, right? And I'll put that kind of in quotes. How many of you can relate to that? I just want you to think about that for a minute, holding that cup. All right, I'm going to show you a few slides here. Any reactions to this photo? It's so funny because last year at this time, it probably meant nothing to you, right? You were like, oh, that's interesting. Boy, somebody must love science. But now it's forever going to mean something, right? So think about what that something is for you. Nearly half of Americans recently have reported that the coronavirus crisis was harming their mental health. In fact, the pandemic is expected to create a greater risk of anxiety, this sense of helplessness, isolation, depression, substance use, increases in PTSD symptoms, right? All of those things. So notice what that photo does for you. Quarantine has been shown to result in increased risk of developing mental health problems. So for those who are exposed to the virus, there's a potential for grief. There's a potential for risk of stigmatization, maybe rejection of others. Maybe there's some fear and worry about your own health. Maybe there's fear and worry about health of your loved ones. You might have some changes in eating or sleeping patterns. You might have difficulty concentrating, loss of income. Maybe your finances have been challenged or stressed over this period of time. And if you say, well, none of those apply to me, I'm certain that there have been some changes in routine. Yeah. I don't know if you can see my background. I'm working from home right now. And although that has little to do with COVID, we're in some changes and adjustments in our county office, which has required me to work from home. But it's interesting as I'm on these kinds of calls, how many people have that same kind of background. And they might be working and they might have a child at home or an animal. I have pets. So sometimes my pets will make their way, in the background and throw me off. Right? So that change in routine, that change in daily activities. So John, do you want to say anything about the new normal?
I don't know what's normal about any of this, it seems like, growing up. I mean, what we're experiencing now, the things that we normally get to do and we get to socialize are no longer available to us. And we're finding ourselves a lot more isolated. And, I never would thought the day that I could walk into a grocery store and not see the shelves stocked, or that I had to keep my distance away from people. I'm a social person. I like being engaged with people. And, this has really been hard. And at times it's really been draining, as Amy talked about. And that's one of the things I really liked about this program, because there's a lot of stress management programs out there, but this one is really about self-care. We hear that a lot in our industry about taking self-care to keep from burnout. And that's really some of the things that we try to drive home in this program. And of course, Zoom. Even though we get that one-on-one connection, I think if anything that this pandemic has taught us is that we like that in-person interaction. We're not as disassociated and not having those communications like we thought.
Absolutely. So when you look at these pictures, again, some of these things we're going, okay, we're 6, 7, even 8 months into this now, and we go, oh, well, yep, oh, school's closed again. Okay, oh gosh, well, voting, you had to make some arrangements to do that, whether you stood and spaced out and waited in a line. And that's a whole other issue, which we're not going into. Right? But that looking at that screen, interacting with people, maybe it's that drive-through testing. I just had a situation where we were looking at trying to find a location for some friends for a drive-through testing option. These are things that we're now going, okay, I guess we just deal with it.
Drive-through took on a whole new meaning this year. There's some good quotes out there in the chat, Amy.
Okay, great. Can you grab those?
Sure. Like
Awesome.
Crystal mentioned that working from home gives you a lot of time to observe and reflect. I think that's is something that we've seen across it. I've heard many, many times that people have had a chance to kind of reflect on what's important. And then Marcia had talked about working from home for me at first was really nice. And then I struggled to keep my focus and felt closed in. I absolutely agree with that. And as you can see, I'm back in my office. I had to get back in here.
So look at these emotions. Look at these pictures. Anybody resonate with you? Trying to get kind of a, capture a lot of different demographics and ages and all of that, situations. But really, I want you to just look at these faces. Aggression, fatigue, anxiety, maybe apathy. Maybe you just want to cry.
Peyton also mentioned, and I think it's a really good point, that I really enjoy working from home and have struggled to transition back into the office. And I think that's another thing we've realized, that sometimes that landscape is changing in how we do our business on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Great point. I made it was kind of a funny post the other day, to a friend of mine. And it was really just about, I miss my commute. I'm a podcast person. And so, really when you think about that drive time is transition time. And so when you're working from home, you have less of that transition. And so I sometimes feel like the lady up at the top that's just got her arms up like, oh, I can't seem to juggle everything.
Yeah, 17% of Americans agree with that, Amy. I was listening to our radio station. They had one of those trivia things, and 17% of Americans miss the commute to and back and forth to work.
Yeah, for sure. So John, when we were putting this presentation together, you liked these particular slides. Do you have anything you want to say about these?
Sure. So during this time, some of us have become couch potatoes, right? Binging out on Netflix or Hulu or anything like that, which has greatly reduced our physical activity level. We probably haven't been eating the healthiest during this time. I think the national average is that we're getting between 8 to 9 pounds added on during this time. And I can attest to that one. Our sleeping patterns are off. We're out of our routine. And so things that we may not have worried about before, we now worry about, or we're staying up later, and it's just really throwing things off. And because we're so close to each other all the time now with our family, sometimes that it really puts a strain on our relationships. And we're probably having a little bit more arguments than we may have before. I like the little dog right there in the middle. It's like, I didn't do anything. This is terrible, right? And so I wonder if there's others around us that kind of feel the same way. They feel that strain because we're getting into a whole new dimension of being around each other during this time, which only adds to our stress.
Right. And when we're stressed, we make different choices in life. And typically those are ones that are really not helpful to us in living our best life. And so it kind of becomes this vicious cycle, right? So we've talked a lot about stress. And, you know, if you attended my other presentations earlier this week, we focused a little bit on stress again. But here's the thing, not all stress is bad. There are some hidden effects. Okay, so we've got that fight or flight, and really that actually fight, flight, or freeze can be really helpful. So if something dangerous is happening, you know, you've got that, oh gosh, okay, I'm gonna, you know, I'm kicking into gear. My hormones are released. I'm gonna breathe harder and faster. My heart rate skyrockets. My digestion is suppressed. This can be a really good thing. It can help us, right, to kind of ward off danger or to escape danger or to get out of a situation. But kind of one of the backsides of that is it also causes this a little bit of difficulty concentrating, kind of that brain fog feeling that, ooh, I'm not thinking quite as sharply and clearly as I want. Because the thing is that cortisol that's released in those times of stress, it floods our brain. And so in the just sort of the immediate or the quick, that's okay. But when it becomes chronic or long-term, that's when we can see those negative effects on the body. In fact, it relates to what we call the cause of the causes. So the World Health Organization talks about this chronic stress and kind of this stress that we're under is kind of this heavy blanket. And so you might go to the doctor and go, gosh, you know, doc, I've just not been sleeping very well. And I've got, you know, chronic headaches and I've got this symptom and this symptom. And when they kind of peel back all of the layers, really at the core is this unmanaged, undealt with stress. It's kind of like that holding that glass of water, right? And those negative effects that it can have on our body. So John and I love this little segment. It's what drains your tank? How does it feel to run on empty? We like this gas gauge analogy, right? And in fact, when I was young and learning how to drive, my dad would say, do not, he loves when I tell this story. It's not a joke. My dad would say, do not ever let your tank get less than, you know, a quarter of a tank. And of course, you know, I was 16 and I was like, I can make it anywhere, right? But what happens, and this was my dad's good advice at the time, what happens when your tank gets that low is you have this, okay, I'm not a car person, so, you know, call me out if I'm saying this wrong, but basically your engine sucks up all of that sludge, all of that gunk from the bottom because it's kind of created this suction inside the system, right? I don't know, catalytic converters, something like that comes to mind. It's something that happens in there. You don't want that. So your body actually does the same thing. So when you're operating kind of at empty, like you're like, I'm just at max capacity, I can't do this anymore. What you're doing is you're getting all of that sludge from the bottom, all the yuck parts of you, and that's what's coming out. And that's what you're kind of using to fuel yourselves, right? Interesting thing is our body does give us signals. And it's just like a car, we get the ding ding, or we get the check engine, or we get the, you know, the oil light comes on. I have a car right now that's just got bells and whistles that I don't really know what they mean, and they ding at me sometimes. Well, they ding at me when it's 40 degrees because the road might be slick. You know what? That's actually a good warning because I live at the lake area and it's really hilly. So sometimes when you go down a hill, you might get something that's a little frostier than you might when it's on top. Similar to our bodies, we need to pay attention even when we think, it's nothing, right? We need to pay attention to that. Autopilot. What do you think, John?
Yeah. Seems like we're always on autopilot at times. And on that last slide, when Amy was talking about in the program, we actually talk about how people can start identifying what our body, when our bodies give us those signals, and how to start recognizing what's going on. Because one of the things that we're going to find ourselves doing is we're going to become so busy we go onto an autopilot. We've all driven somewhere and got there and didn't even realize how we got there. We've all taken a shower and probably can't even remember what we did, if we washed our hair or not, because we were worrying about everything else we had to get done during the day. That's autopilot. You ever been driving around town and all of a sudden you see something that you've never seen before? And somebody's like, that's been there 6 months. How have you not seen it? That's 6 months of our life that we have not even recognized what was going on around us. That is just now gone because we've allowed ourselves to get on autopilot. So one of the things we talk about in the program is helping people to get into the present moment, to start letting some of those to-do lists be somewhere else. Put it away, live in the moment, really recognize and absorb life before it just passes us by. And before we know it, we're like, where did it all go? And that's because we stay on autopilot. We start from the moment we take off to the moment we landed, and we didn't even have control over it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that contributes to that autopilot is this kind of loop that we play, right? So many thoughts. I think sometimes that our thoughts can take us down this tunnel. I found this picture and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Scientists actually estimate that the average person has about 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of those are the same ones day after day. What am I going to eat for breakfast? What should I wear to work? How, blah, blah, blah. 80% though of those repetitive thoughts are negative. Yikes. Let that sink in just for a minute. This is based on research from the National Science Foundation. So we have all these thoughts, right? We have a lot of repetitive ones because a lot of us, kind of get into routines. But then, whoa, a lot of those thoughts are negative messages that we're telling ourselves. So think about that. Not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'll never get this done. Kind of that doom and gloom, right? And so if you find yourself stuck in that pattern, here's a little bit of information. All those thoughts, they don't always equal facts. See, our imagination, it's an amazing thing, right? It can invent the most amazing things. We've got really creative, fabulous people that we surround ourselves with. But our imagination can also cause us to believe things that aren't true. And a lot of times those messages come from ourselves, right? So maybe it was things that happened in your past. Maybe it's something you're anticipating in the future. See, thoughts develop a life of their own. And sometimes those thoughts make things worse than they actually are. And our thoughts can create our reality when in fact, they're just our thoughts. So in the program, we talk about this concept called monkey mind, and we really kind of dive into what does that mean to let go of some of those repetitive thoughts, some of those habits, some of those routines that kind of cause us to get in this cycle where the same old thinking causes the same old results. So let me give you an example. Maybe you walk into a room and you see two people that you know and you think you're going to go over and sit by them and they're talking to each other, and as soon as you walk up, they stop talking. Ever had that like message in your brain that's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? They're talking about me. Or maybe your teen is late for curfew. And so your mind immediately goes to, there's been an accident, they're hurt, they need me, something's happened, right? Not necessarily facts, and they might be, but not necessarily. Our mind tends to take us down that path. Watch yourself. A good way to check this is to notice if you're saying sentences like I should, I must, I always, I never, right? Those absolutes, those can really be kind of like repeating those messages. Because see, here's the thing, something as simple as changing the words, especially the words that we internally say to ourselves, helps to change our thoughts. And then by changing our thoughts, we have the opportunity to change kind of that path of our lives. Think about, you know, those tunnels that I showed a minute ago. You see here, the choice is yours. Once you become aware of these thought patterns, you really do have a choice in how you respond. Now, that's easier said than done. It takes practice. And so again, a lot of what we talk about and teach in the program is giving you these different tools for your toolbox, these different what we call practices. And you get opportunities with a workbook, and you get to kind of go through and give yourself the opportunity to learn and practice some of these things. So real quickly, one of the ways that you can do this is by being aware, and this gets you off autopilot, of thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. Okay, so it's a real easy little technique, and you just kind of ask yourself those questions. So when you kind of get your answer there, and we'll talk about this more in just a minute, you're able to take that cup of water and decide, I'm gonna pour some of that out. Okay, maybe I'm gonna pour a little more of that out. All right, maybe I'm just gonna actually set that down, right? That choice is yours. So let's practice it. How are you? If we were in person, or if you put it in the chat, right? A lot of us, the standard answer is, I'm fine, right? And so fine is kind of like a 4-letter word. Fine is like those, what's the acronym? Like feelings I'm not expressing, right? But if you honestly check in and see how you're doing, it might be the only time that you've done this, maybe all week. It's Thursday already. Have you asked yourself, how am I doing? Most of the time we're really focused on that view out. We're really focused on making sure that we've got our to-do list checked, or we're making sure that we've got others in our lives taken care of. But see, the thing is, when we check in with ourselves, we're really much better equipped to take care of all of those other pieces of our lives. And this is all about taking care of you, all about helping to manage all of that stress, both internally and externally, that happens in our lives. So John does this part really well, talking about a full tank. You want to chime in anything here, John?
Sure. Of course. I'm Extension. We love talking, right?
That's right.
How do you feel whenever your tank's full? When all your needs are being met on a daily basis? Do you feel creative? Do you feel energized? Do you feel like you can make changes and change the world? Of course you can. Yeah, sometimes those answers are always fine when people ask us how we are. And we actually talk about that in the class on congruency, because what we show on the outside may not be what's going on the inside. And this is where you really have to assess of how your tank is at, whether it's halfway or a quarter, or if it's full. You're much more in line with your values when your tank is full, and that's why you're a lot more energetic, creative because your insides is lined up with your outsides when your tank's completely full. You're meeting those core values that you find to be very important. You're more grateful for the things that are around you. And it's really sometimes those little acts that can really ramp up to start filling your tank. I always think about the parking lot situation. You know, people are trying to get out, and it only takes one person, a random act of kindness, to stop and let somebody in, and then you'll have more people right behind you doing it. And I always, it kind of fills my tank when I get to start that process and I see people behind me doing the same things. And so as leaders, are the people that are below us kind of need that. They need for us to open up that space so they can get in line and go along with it as well. And we've seen through this process that we just got done with another class, me and Amy, of working with supervisors, and they started implementing some of these practices, and it filled their tank. Their employees were feeling much more confident, and their tanks were being filled, and it creates that atmosphere that you're really wanting in your environment to be productive and to reduce burnout or people leaving because they are happy with what's going on.
Absolutely. And, you know, I want you to think about not only what if your tank was full, but who fills your tank? So is there somebody that you can spend time with? Is there someone that you can reach out to? So it's a pay it forward, but if we're always in that giving mode and our tank gets depleted, we've got to think about who or what it is that fills our tank. Because a lot of times when we react to the stress around us in really unhealthy ways, we can find ourselves back on some of those earlier pictures, maybe overeating, maybe over or under sleeping, maybe substance use, a lot of those things, and those will just deplete our tank quicker than anything. So I want you to use, if you feel like it, because this is always fun to share, what are some things in your life that fill your tank? What are some things or some people? So you can use the chat and go ahead and put those in. Because a funny thing happens in our brains when we read those positives, even from other people, it starts to create those new neural pathways in our brain. And it helps us to respond kind of with that glass half full instead of half empty. So John, are you able to see the chat? If I pop it up, it'll put a big black square on our screen.
Yeah, I see the chat. A lot of animals, grandkids, crafting. Yep, church is a big one, which has put a damper during this pandemic. My health and wellness, reading. Yep, I always like sitting out there on the back porch early in the morning with a tall or a nice hot cup of tea. I'm not a coffee person, and just sitting out enjoying nature. Music. Yep. Music's another one. I think that's what people sometimes miss on their commute is getting to listen to some of their favorite songs. My daughter hates it when I put on Bon Jovi, but hey, it makes me.
Listen, if you watched the Country Music Awards last night, they said that music was the universal uniter. So I had to clap for that one.
Yep. Going for a walk or a run. Yep. Exercise definitely releases those endorphins that make us feel better.
Absolutely. So think about that car analogy that we talked about earlier. When you keep your tank full, even if it's mostly full, it allows you to be more resilient when those stressors do come. Because here's the thing, we're not going to always be full, right? We're not always going to be full to the brim. And really, we're not always going to be completely empty. We kind of go along this path, right? Life is like just a big spectrum, and we're somewhere along it. And you know what? You can be really at the top and full at the beginning of the day. And by noon, you can be like, whew, that really just kind of sucked everything out of me. And this is where you've got to be intentional and using these tools to say, what do I need to do right now? And one of the good questions, and again, we talk more about this, but one of the good questions is you can say, brain, what are you thinking? It's kind of like that check-in on yourself. So what am I thinking right now? Another good way to do this is to, and of course, I'm bringing everything back to the course. We'll give you this in the course, but you can Google it. But just Google an emotions words or feelings word list. Sometimes it's having that right language, having the right words to say, you know, I'm feeling anxious right now, or I'm feeling sad. And so what do I need to do, or how can I kind of flip that, right? Or switch that to a more positive outlook. And sometimes the language can help us do that. All right, so this is one of the activities that we do, and this is one of our absolutely favorite ones that we do in the class. And it's really about saying yes to you. That might be uncomfortable for some of us. You know, culturally, historically, how you've been raised, what kind of your story is, you might really put yourself at the bottom of the list. This class, I want to just make this really clear. This is not about me time in the, like the air quotes me time, but it's really about making yourself the healthiest that you can be, kind of mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, healthiest that you can be, so that you're able to be everything that you want to be in your life for all of those other people, places, things, etc. And so when you think about this list, in order to say yes to you, you really need to know what you value. And so that values list, kind of talking about values, is something that we spend a lot of time on, kind of like John mentioned in the slide before, thinking about what is it that I value. And so a really easy way to kind of figure that out is to ask yourself this question. And you can even jot this down and ponder this for the rest of today. But life is too short to what? How would you answer that? And it might be easier to flip it around. Life is too short not to. And it can be lighthearted or it can be really deep. Right?
Yeah, I'm a Cardinals fan, but life's too short not to at least go see Wrigley Field one time.
I'm a coffee person, so I'm saying life's too short to drink bad coffee. But again, it might be deeper. It might be more serious. It might be more profound. This is kind of your guiding principles, right? These are the things that help you to figure out, who am I, what's important to me, what matters, and what are the other things, just like the water cup, that I can let go and that I can set down. So if you want to know how to find us, I'm going to, actually, I don't think I can from here because I'm sharing my screen. John, if you or Shelly, maybe if you would drop in this link into the chat, that would be great. This is, so MU Extension, right? We have our own website. And if you go on to, you can put the 2 in or you don't have to, extension.missouri.edu. And then in the search bar, you can just type in Taking Care of You. So we're offering these classes all over the state. But most of them right now, I would say 90% we're offering virtually. So you can pop in, take a class. If you're interested in bringing this to your group, kind of as a team building, or, you know, just to kind of learn some of these practices and strategies, give John or I, just drop us an email, or you can put your email in the chat and we will get back to you with some information. But again, we're super passionate, if you can't tell, about this program. And John, thanks for letting me put you on the spot. We're always really good to tag team and teach together, but he did that totally without notes. So I appreciate that at 8:30 in the morning. So thanks. And we really would love to come and kind of see how we can make this work for your team or for your group. So I'm going to take the slideshow off so you can see me or I can see you. And if you have comments, questions, if there's things that are in the chat that we've missed.
I'm getting some really good advice on Wrigley Field. So.
Oh, very nice. Very cool.
I know one of the things we talked about here was our brain, and we kind of take that as granted, this gray matter, but we actually kind of break down the brain a little bit, a basic anatomy of the brain of what's being engaged when we're in emotional states and when we're in a thinking state. So, and then it kind of just builds on to each other. Yeah, great point. It was nice to get validation and know that I'm not alone in how I'm feeling. You're probably right there with it, Angie, that there are probably a lot of people that their fuel level's running low right now.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we didn't mention is, those masks a lot of time hide one of those tools that you always have with you, and that's your smile. And I don't mean that to be kind of trivial, but it's really true that those facial expressions, not only eye contact, but your facial expressions, your feedback that you get from someone else and that you give to someone else, a lot of times those masks can hide it. So you're right, Crystal, you do have to learn to smile with your eyes. So look for ways to be creative in figuring out how not only to fill your own tank, but maybe to think about who's that person in your life that really could benefit from you reaching out. I've got a colleague and a good friend, and I think she's on this call today. She might have left already, but she's so good at knowing just the right time to just chime in and give you just kind of that, just that boost, that, hey, I'm thinking about you and just wanted to check in to see how you're doing and you're doing a great job, or I'm proud of you, or any of those kinds of things. So those can fill your tank as well.
She's there. And it's kind of interesting because she's a nutrition and health person. So this really wasn't, but some of them have really gained a lot from teaching this course. We won't put her on the spot unless she just wants to be.
Well, thank you all so much. If you have any other comments or questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to John or I. We'd be happy to visit with you a little bit more about the program or about, what that might look like for your group. Happy Thursday.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, John. This has been an excellent way to start the day. And I want to thank all of our participants for being such good joiners in chat today. That's wonderful to see that as well. Again, we'll be having this recording available next week, hopefully. And then I just encourage you to fill out the survey that you get regarding this class to let us know what you thought of it and how we could improve the HR training conference in general. So without further ado, I will wish you all a good day, and thank you, Amy, for filling in on so many of these sessions. I think you've provided a really great addition to the training conference.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, John, as well. All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys, and wish you a good day.